but I want to acknowledge each of you here. Just so those who can't see, we have people from New South Wales, Tasmania, Gold Coast, other parts of Brisbane. I'm not sure if there's anyone elsewhere that I haven't noticed, but we have at least 10 men online watching us. At least they're watching us too. And I want to acknowledge all of you. I did make some notes because Hudson and I are both 7s on the Enneagram, and honestly, this could go like one of those crazy Chinese rockets. But who knows where it might crash land. So I thought I better have some notes so we actually go somewhere meaningful. But I remember one of the first things I heard, which really depressed me when I first engaged with this work 13 years ago, was it will take 5 generations of initiated men, and I dare say initiated men and women, to turn the Western world around to a place where our planet and our cultures will start to heal instead of causing such damage. And I thought, 5 generations, I won't live to see 3. I'll be lucky to live to see 2 after me. And yet, here I am, almost 62, and I now am sitting alongside my own son, who represents the next generation. And it is, just in looking at me, this is kind of weird for me because it's always like been, well, for a long time, it was just mostly men over 30, over 40. I remember when I did my rights with Felipe in 2009, and you would have been how old?
34.
34.
I was the youngest one.
You were the youngest on the whole rights. And it is such a wonderful energy seeing another generation. Such enthusiasm, such what older men often don't naturally have. So I'm going to dive in and allow for some question and answers. And a question for you. Do you hear on Forged, and I'm not giving away too much here, a Grimm Brothers story?
Yes, we do.
About giving away your gold?
Yeah. Do you want me to tell it?
No.
No, not tell it, but...
Yeah, give a short version, because it's not the rights, it's just a story.
Yeah, it's a story of... Okay.
Yeah, tell the abbreviated version of it.
There's a Grimm Brothers story about a man who comes out of the military and gets a job with a strange man down in a fiery furnace.
In the underworld.
In the underworld. And he has to keep fires going and sweeping wood chips for 7 years. And it's hard and it's difficult, but at the end of the 7 years, cool, your contract's up, here's your wood chips. And as your payment, and as he enters back into the above world, all these wood chips have turned to gold. But from the 7 years of being underground, his hair is long, his nails are long, he doesn't look like he fits in. He's got soot all over his face from the fires, he hasn't showered, he hasn't groomed. And he very quickly, in a way to acclimatize and fit back in with the world, just starts giving his gold away to anybody that will take it. And very quickly just loses it all and ends up having to sign another deal for 7 years.
7 more years in the underworld.
7 more years to get the gold back because he gave it away way too quickly.
So we say that to men every year, both younger and older men who do the rights, because it's something in the ego that when you find something, you want to promote it. My ego wants to promote. It loves it. Look at you. You're listening to me. Look how important I am. It's about me and you too now. You know, look, I'm sorry if this offends anybody. I don't mean it to. But as an ex-pastor of a church, I discovered that the Pentecostal way is that the son of the senior pastor becomes the senior pastor. You know it's true. It's, what's the word for it? When nepotism. Nepotism is rife within, and it's quite egoic. this was my son. I'm so proud of him. And you go, well, great. Yeah, it's Hudson. He's his own person. He would become an extension of my ego. And I'm even aware of that tonight because like Natasha said, I am so proud of Hudson, but not because of what he's achieved. And this is the thing that we feel like we've achieved. Your ego can feel like you've achieved something. How did you avoid that, or how did you manage that sense of, well, now I'm an initiated man, I'm so much wiser than other men my age?
That's a very good question. I think the nature of the rights kind of, to a degree, can beat that out of you. Thank you. My experience from my rights was I was around a lot of men that I hadn't met before. I only knew one man, two men there, and they were both a little bit emotionally distant from me. And it was interesting to be with men that I didn't know sharing a vulnerable space and realizing that on the first day, men that I rocked up and may have judged as soon as I got there and went, oh, this guy's full of himself, or oh, this guy's got a big ego. Very quickly, the vulnerability came in and I went, oh no, that's just me having the ego, wanting to be better. And I think it kind of shattered a mirror that everyone else has it all together and everyone knows what they're doing. And once that mirror was shattered, I was able to confront the part of myself that doesn't know what I'm doing and acknowledge that I don't have it all together and I'm piecing it together as I go.
And the fact that you don't have it all together is actually your entry ticket. In fact, if you have it all together, we actually screen applications. Max screens the ones for the older men. And if a man goes, well, because I think this will make me a person of influence and power, well, immediately it's thanks, but no thanks. Think about it next year. You're not ready. Yeah. What are the 5 promises?
Your life is not about you. Life is hard. You are not that important. You are not in control, and you are going to die.
Sound pretty good, hey? Who wants to sign up who hasn't done the rights yet? Wouldn't you just love to dive into that stuff? I'll give you the abbreviated version, life shit, and you die. That's what you're signing up for. And yeah, I mean, how on earth would you promote that? How on earth, like we did radio advertising for the rights 2 years ago. I think we got one, man. Crazy. I'll tell you. Well, every cent we spent was wasted. I mean, it was a great use of money. We once had a man come on the rights, and I asked him, why did he come on them? And he said, my wife sent me. It was his 50th birthday present from her. What do you think happened? He walked out on them. He couldn't do them because he wasn't choosing it. Why did you do them? I mean, you've watched me go through it, and I know, I think it was beloved Dan Foster who greeted you with the words, what are you doing here? This is your dad's stuff, not yours. What are you bothering with this nonsense for?
It was great because Dan actually spoke out a part of me that I hadn't yet listened to. He said it and I went, oh, I am feeling that. I didn't know I was feeling that until he said it.
I was role playing, I guess. It wasn't the intention.
For those who haven't met Dan or online, he's a real bastard. No, he's not. He's an 8 on the Enneagram, but he's not. He's a good man. Anyway, go on.
What was the question? Sorry.
So that whole experience of Why did you do the rights? Why would you do something when you were only 22 at the time? 23? 23.
I think there's a few reasons. I have recently gotten married, in the last 2 years. And I am very aware of my own limitations. And I wanted to go to the rights. My initial motivation was to go there so that I could master my limitations and come out as the best man that has ever walked the face of the earth. But I also had the, spoiler alert, that's not what happened. But I also had the added motivator of, I saw you before your rights, holding a lot more certainty about the world and how that was damaging. And then after your rights, I remember, I think it was your rights. You were away for the week and I was 11, I think. And you were away and I missed my dad because he's gone. And me and mum came in the car to pick you up. And I was sitting in the back seat and you got in the front seat. You had facial hair longer than I'd ever seen. You had mud all over you and you smelt. You were extremely loud and you had a grin from ear to ear. And I had two reactions. One, I was terrified because who the hell is this and what have you done with my dad? But two, I was amazed that you seemed freer than I'd ever seen you. You seemed yourself. You seemed just alive. And I've seen that since you've done this work. You've yearned for the circles that you do and for events like this and for your chance to go back and be a part of the rights each year. And I see how in a world of control and certainty, you've managed to age, not that you're super old, but you've managed to age in a way that is graceful and countercultural. And that's something that I looked at and go, yeah, I want that. I don't want to be a man that ages and just gets bitter about the world, but a man that embraces it and all of its shit.
I remember, and I don't think only my wife Judy would know what a dark place I was in when I went on my rights. But anyone who's been to Camp Somerset, there's this very, very long hill from when you spend a whole day out in the wilderness and you walk up this long hill back to the cabin. And I remember walking up that long hill feeling like, well, nothing fundamentally has actually changed. My whole world I'm going back to is the same. But somehow I now know, even though I can't explain to anyone ever, I'm going to be okay. I can do this. I was in depression and burnout at the time, and all my certainty was replaced with mystery. And somehow that was okay, which was really, really weird because my whole world, I was told, was certainty would give me what I needed. In fact, I still find that all the books I once read, the books that were promoted by the world I lived in, were promoting certainty. Step A, step B, and step C, and you'll get this outcome. It's transactional to the point that you are in control and you're meant to be in control. And if you're not in control, you're not, somehow, this is the language, if you're not in control, you're not trusting God. What was that word, Natasha? Too blessed to be stressed.
Too blessed to be stressed.
I'm going, so like that, well then, obviously I'm failing, so I need to get some formula right so I'm not stressed.
I didn't say that.
And out of the rights, I think you discover that being stressed is being human. You don't know this, but when we first arrived, our wives went up to this space, but Hudson heard the stream in flood after the storm, and I heard it too. And we both went down to the bridge to watch the white water falling over a weir just down here. And just before he sat here and he heard it, How did the rights connect you with nature? Tell me about that, because that's clearly something that I've connected with.
Yeah, no, that's new. Prior to the rights, I liked nature. It was nice to look at. You see a nice sunset, you put it on Instagram. Similar with poetry as well. I didn't like poetry. I actually hated poetry up until I did my rights. Love it now. But I remember for one of your birthdays recently, you had a whole bunch of people sitting around reading poetry. I mean, this is before I did my rights, and I remember sitting there going, this is the most boring thing I've ever been a part of. What excuse can I come up with to leave early? And I look back on that now and go, wow, if only I knew now what I knew then, what I know now. I think the beauty of the rights for me was it threw me into nature head first and removed all the other distractions that I love to cling to. And allowed nature to be a calming voice. Where that sound of that stream is just so peaceful. And I could get a sleeping bag and a pillow and sleep right next to that creek tonight, and that would be an incredible night's sleep, because it would just be so disconnected. And prior to my rights, I would have thought disconnection is a horrible thing. You don't want disconnection, because then you're going to miss out on stuff, you're going to fall behind, but it's a great detox.
Speaking of poetry and nature, David White, in his poem Sweet Darkness, said, to feel abandoned is to not deny the intimacy of your surroundings. And what I experience, and I know you do too, is the intimacy of nature. It's like it's your very, 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 very best friend who asks nothing of you, demands nothing of you, just says, come and be with me. I will love you back to health.
Even more so, I feel it says, come and be with me, but even if you won't, I'm still here.
I'm still here.
I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere.
Reminds me of that shirt I once saw. I'd rather be in the mountains thinking of God than sitting in church thinking of the mountains. There is that sense of we connect with it, don't we? Richard Rohr, in the opening lines of his seminal work, Everything Belongs, wrote this. And I think it's really interesting that he wrote this at the beginning of the book that put him on the map. How do you make attractive that which isn't? How do you sell emptiness, vulnerability, and non-success? How do you talk dissent when everything is about assent? How can you possibly market letting go in a capitalistic culture? How do you present Jesus to a Promethean mind? A Promethean mind is the mind that needs to know and understand and explain everything. How do you present Jesus to a Promethean mind? How do you talk about dying to a church trying to appear perfect? This is not going to work. Admitting this might be my first step. It's his way of acknowledging this is never going to sell. I was in Anthony Joseph's a dear brother who did the rights many years ago, and we were in a contemplative, learning about contemplative prayer. And he looked at me one day and he said, do you think this will ever go mainstream? And I said, what do you think? And he looked crestfallen and he said, no. Now, I know he now doesn't ever wrestle with that, but he'd left a world where mainstream, the culture, the prevailing culture, which was everywhere about what you can sell and promote, what you can sell and promote. Can't sell nature. I can't promote nature. I mean, I can talk about it, but I'm not making money out of it. Not many people want to know. This is a challenge though, isn't it? How do you now live with You had a friend who you invited to go on Forge just a few weeks ago who said he'd go, and then he bailed on you at the very last minute because he was buying a car. Is that the reason?
He bought a car and then it had problems. He bought a 60s series Land Cruiser and then needed to dump $4,000 into it to make it work.
And you really wanted him to be there.
I really wanted it to be there. In fact, him pulling out forced me to confront my own motivations for going. Because he pulled out and the first thought that came into my head is, well, why am I going now? What's the point of me being there if he's not coming? And that was big because that highlighted the selfishness in me, that I wanted to go to be his stoic friend, his one who's going to guide him through this process that will help sort his life out. And
You're going to be the hero.
I want to be the hero. Yeah, that was the motivation. And I actually, when he called me to say I can't come because my car's broken, I gave him a bit of flack for it over the phone and just out of my gut. And then when I got back from the rides, I called him back and said, I need to apologize. And he's like, oh, did you do something? And I'm just like, you may not have noticed, but I definitely was just projecting my stuff onto you. And that's another thing about these rights. There's no promise that you're going to be perfect and you're not going to do things like that and you're not going to fall apart at times. But when you do, you can notice it and you can catch it and you can...
But when you notice it and you catch it, you're instantly humiliated by it, noticing it. So how do you deal with that humiliation that you feel when you notice?
I like it. I do actually like it. As long
Are you
as
really a 7?
as long as it's here, as long as it's not a wide scale, I've made a fool out of myself. But I've spent a lot of my life blaming other people for my own problems. And it's a very new sensation to notice when I'm in the wrong and take responsibility for it. And it's a good feeling. I like this. Being able to call him and apologize was something that it made me feel very, it made me realize the growth that I've been through, that I can admit to one of my closest friends, hey, that was my bad. I liked that.
I get really excited hearing that because what I hear is a man, not a young man, a man. Ken Wilber is this brilliant writer who talks about spiral dynamics and Claire Graves' models in a way that is so integrative and brilliant. But one of the best things that Ken Wilber says is that there is a 4-stage process of maturation for all of us. The first one is clean up. If you don't clean up, you are leaving a mess everywhere. No one's going to respect you. No one's going to want to hear you. You're going to end up with failed relationships. You're going to end up broke. You're going to end up unemployed and so on. But the next stage is to grow up. And grow up is to take responsibility for yourself, show up on time, tell the truth, have some basic integrity and so on. Stage 3, which he says often takes 30, 40 years. In fact, Bill Plotkin, another great writer, says that we live in an age of patho-adolescence. Adolescence is a Western construct. It emerged in the late 19th, early 20th century, coincided with advertising. Because with a capitalistic culture, we can sell stuff to teenagers and their parents will pay for it just to keep them amused. And so we keep stroking it. What does advertising do? What does our culture celebrate? Youth. And what is that about? Taking no responsibility for yourself at all. In Aboriginal culture, adolescence would last 1 week. You go on a rites of passage and you'd come back a man, or you wouldn't come back at all. You'd be dead. You wouldn't be part of the community. And so Ken Wilber says that waking up is the most difficult. Neo, waking up in the Matrix. Do you think he actually wants to wake up in this matrix? It sucks, except that it's real. It's real. And so what I'm hearing you say there is that a rites of passage or forged is causing you to notice what's going on in you. Notice that, oh gosh, I want to be the hero. And that's actually using power over against your friend. And it dishonors him, and you don't want that. And so you become aware of it and you address it. That is really cool.
I thought so.
Just stroked his ego. Now he's back where he started.
Into the rights again.
On that topic, what would you just say to somebody who said initiation is an achievement, or it's an accomplishment, or it's an attainment, or it's arriving? It's actually, you've got there.
I would say absolutely if you do it wrong. Yeah, it's if somebody were to say, fortunately I haven't had anybody say that to me, so I haven't had to prepare a response or come up with one on the spot like I'm doing now. But if someone were to say that to me, I think I would ask them of their experience of initiation and what makes them think that. What is it and what has the experience been of somebody who has said they were initiated, or why is it that the response in you?
I think there is this sense in which I find it as a beginning. It's a starting again. Ben Burns on Your Forge said, do you get it? Tell me what he said and what happened.
Well, we were talking about I'm not sure which of the hard truths it was. It might have been that you were not in control or that you were going to die. It might have been one of those two, but I'm not too sure. But there was a moment that he looked every man in the eyes and said, do you get it? And then left about 30 seconds of silence, to which some men started doing this. And he said, no, if you get it, you don't get it. If you get it, you don't get it. You're not supposed to get it. If you don't get it, then you've finally gotten it, but then you don't get it again. Which left us all a bit confused.
So you know, you're in good company.
Yeah.
I have a framed quote. It's actually by Rumi, which Richard Rohr has added something to. It says, sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment instead. And Richard Rohr added to that, it's such a willingness to live with bewilderment that characterizes the true wise person. How do you live with bewilderment? And I think it's like that stream in the darkness. You can't see it, you can hear it. You don't know why it's calling you, but it is. Now, in America, there's a conversation right now, and I'm backtracking a little bit. And I'm only aware because I'm involved in this work. It's going all over the world, but of course, COVID means that the only place it's really happening right now is Australia, because they can't do it in Europe. They can't do it in America. They did it in the Czech Republic last year, and men caught COVID on MROP, and of course they had to shut the whole process down and shorten it by several days, which isn't at all what we want to happen. But there's this question that, and I'm going to name it here, and this is important because I'm looking at Donna and Judy and recognising that we're men. And
You're not including us. We're not.
no, I had noticed. And I'm going to ask you your question. How has it been in your marriage? And for Natasha, if you can speak somewhat for, and Natasha, I can even let you speak. What's it like for you? If you want to, you don't have to. If you wanted to speak, what's it like for you watching a husband go through the process of forged and coming back to you? What's that like?
It feels new. It doesn't feel familiar, and I like that.
because without you knowing it, you search for that your whole life. So it's unfamiliar. It's the shortest way I can put it. Good.
Is there anything you wanted to add, Judy? Because I've never actually asked you, and I think that's remiss of me. Because you've journeyed with me for 12 years, and you've seen
So what do you ask me?
what is it like. You know, you remember that time I had that amazing encounter with God, and you said all I talked about was me.
I had for 3 weeks. Just on another planet. And then you said, isn't it great? Is it great for our marriage? And I said, well, it's not really been great for the family because you've had this wonderful
It was all about me.
This wasn't the rights. This was pre the rights.
Yep.
This was nothing to do with this. It's all about you. And I was happy because you were happy, but I thought eventually you'll come back and be more part of the you were walking in the clouds.
But what was it like? What has it been like since over the long course of the last 12 years?
Well, I think it's been good that you had to face the 5, are they called truths?
Promises.
Hard truths. I don't think you ever thought about those ever being an extrovert. Well, maybe that's, I don't know if extroverts.
Sevens.
But Natasha and I don't think it was 7 months.
This is a conversation.
Sounds like one for the car.
Anyway,
You're here proud on the ride home.
No, the fact that you had to face things that was really good for you and good for us.
is there in you this sense of, well, hang on, what about us? You guys get to do this.
Absolutely.
Well, I have a journey and we journey together, but
And your work takes you into a lot of that world.
yeah, my work takes me.
But for you, Natasha,
I find a lot of silence and downtime in what I do. I run 2 businesses, and so I'm with myself and my thoughts a lot. And before dating Hudson, we were best friends for 6 years and are still best friends. And so it's not that I do everything with my husband and I don't have a life outside of him. I do everything with my best friend. And so in the process, I felt like I was being left behind, but it was a good feeling because it was good for him and I want that for my best friend. So it was a bit of a hard pill to chew and swallow. It was, yeah, and I'm working through it.
I'm bringing it up because I will keep bringing the 2 things that are shifting within Centre for Men is the awareness of younger men, and that's happening and it will keep happening, the next generation. And that's why we're having this conversation. But the other reason is because the other thing that's happening is that we're hearing the voice of women, which our own shadow, suppressed and denied for too long. And I will not let that happen anytime I get to open my mouth. It matters too much because I've heard that voice.
And I have to say that if I didn't have my work and that input in my life, I would probably be jealous of what's happened to you. I would feel that I wanted to have it too.
Judy works in a very contemplative workspace with people of great depth, which is wonderful. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that if you look around, we're all very white, all of us. We're very monoculture. except the person almost closest to me. But in some ways, most of your friends are white. Not all of them. You've got Asian friends, as in East Asian, South Asian. You're far more integrated than I am because I can make that statement and not even notice my own daughter-in-law. We're heteronormal, cisgen males, too many of us. And I think that's a question that we will continue to struggle with. How do we reach people outside of our experience that we don't notice? Our shadow will say they're fine. The truth is if we're going to become truly an initiated culture that we leave no one behind. No one behind. It's too easy to leave people behind. Hudson, what's the hardest thing you live with as a man who's done Forged?
Well, that's loaded.
I'll share mine, just while you're thinking about it. Mine, at least initially, was loneliness. I felt like I didn't have people who understood me, and I felt like I couldn't communicate with people. I was grateful Kent, across this room, who's become a very dear friend, called me before I did my rites and told me he was, as a good evangelical, praying for me. But it meant that my own journey mattered to him. And I've had a men's circle, others, Max, as part of that, where I felt included. And if I hadn't had that, it would have been impossible, I think, for me. Because I don't know how I would navigate it. It's almost, in some way, I couldn't do business as usual. I couldn't go back to the life I'd had. And I wanted to. I kind of wanted to take the blue pill and just forget it had happened so I could have my normal social world back. I was lonely. That was my experience.
I think the hardest thing for me has been, I wish I could be in two places at once. Our world is very busy and very fast-paced and very quick-moving, and you don't get a lot of time to stop and breathe and smell the roses. And as a young man, I want to move at a fast pace. I want to achieve things and have full momentum and just keep going and doing more and experiencing all of life that I can. But there's another part of me that just wants to go and sit on a bridge and listen to the creek flow. And I can't do both. I can't do both because they are complete polar opposites. And that's been the hardest thing for me. And that was the hardest thing on re-entry after I did my rites. I came back and I was floating on a cloud. Natasha can attest to this. I was floating on a cloud where I was a very different person, where I was just, nothing fazed me for about a week and a half. I actually walked in the door and my brother was there, and I looked him in the eye and said, "Hi Dom, how are you?" And his response was, "Holy shit, what have they done to you?" I was floating on a cloud for a bit, but then I came down and crashed really, really hard to the point where I got really stressed because I had 3 assignments due and I needed work to get done, and I thought, oh no, this is life. That sucks. I can't be on that cloud all the time. I can't just disconnect from everything whenever I want to. I need to be connected. And that's the cognitive dissonance that I'm wrestling with and have been wrestling with since I did my rites.
Sorry to interrupt. Someone's got headlights on. Does anyone have a Subaru system? Yeah, the lights are on. Oh. We'll jumpstart it.
Out of control.
Control. Not in control.
Sorry.
One of the things that I've thought about is the way that myths are told in popular culture is through movies, and you and I have watched a lot of movies together. And I was reflecting on this. You especially love the Christopher Nolan Batman series. And I think you could almost verbatim quote
Yes.
the second movie.
Oh, all three.
All three.
Please, all three.
There you go. Well, then you're going to not have any trouble here. And what you notice is that each of these movies, the hero always has a sage to help him find his way. Ra's al Ghul, Morpheus, Gandalf, Obi-Wan, you name it, there's always someone sent to the man who's on this journey, or the person who's on this journey. So Ra's al Ghul meets Bruce in a prison and tells him he's truly lost. What does he tell him to do?
He says, at the bottom of the mountain, there's a blue flower. Pick this flower. If you make it to the top, then you might find what you truly were looking for in the first place. To which Bruce responds, what was I looking for? And Raz says, only you can know that.
Isn't that brilliant? What do you, knowing about what you do at Forge, what does that tell you?
That there's, to do a complete parallel, there's the blue flower, there's the delicateness to it. There's a sensitivity. But there's a mountain, and it's cold and it's hard and you have to climb it. And once you get there, you might find what it is that you are looking for, but no one else can tell you what it is. No one can tell you what the red pill is that you need to swallow. No one can tell you what the thing is that you are searching for, what you are yearning for in life. Only you can know that.
I watched The Matrix again, that scene where Neo goes to meet Morpheus for the first time. It's really interesting because I missed detail. It's a stormy, rainy night. Morpheus is in this run-down, dark building. He hasn't got a clue who he is. It's clearly, it feels and looks dangerous. And Morpheus says to Neo, unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to experience it for yourself. So we don't tell what a rites of passage is. You have to experience it for yourself. Frodo offers Gandalf the ring. Says, you have it. I don't want it. That's a person ready for initiation. A person who doesn't want power, doesn't want fame, doesn't want wealth, isn't doing it for himself. Luke doesn't go to Obi-Wan because he thinks it's a good idea. Why would you go to old Ben Kenobi in the desert? The only reason he goes there is because his uncle and aunt are killed and their house is burnt to the ground. None of these men chose to go on their journeys because they seemed like good ideas at the time. I went on the journey because I was, as I said, burnt out, and I thought, well, I'll try anything. I'll try anything because anything's better than what I've got. Every man has his own story. The sun has its own story that no curtain can stop. Do you sometimes wish you could go back to living unconsciously?
I don't wish that I could, I do.
Thank you. Oh, beautiful. Better than my question.
I do often, every day, every single day I do. I did today. Today I was on a prac teaching in a school, and I was rushing around from lesson to lesson. And there's moments that I'm pulled out, or I'm like nature, like the stream of an overflowing creek running. There's an invitation to slow down. And I never used to take those invitations. I used to keep moving. But now those invitations are like a huge welcoming hug to me, even the shit ones. I had a colleague that I'm working with at the moment tell me this morning that one of their close friends has just passed away. And that was horrible. And it's horrible for her and horrible for her friend's family and will continue to be horrible for a long time. But in that moment, I was thankful that I had done the rites because I was able to be present. I was able to notice that invitation to stop and acknowledge her experience. She left, I took her classes for the day. I picked back up again, kept moving, unconsciously rushing from class to class, and then it bucketed down rain. And I sat down at my desk and I watched the rain bouncing off a corrugated tin roof. And I just stopped and stared at it for a bit. And that was nice. And it was this invitation that I saw nobody else taking. I saw school kids running through the rain, even when teachers were yelling at them to stop. But everyone was just existing, just moving, trying to get to the next thing. And all I could see was a screaming invitation to slow down, stop for a few seconds. You don't have to rush anywhere.
The great theologian of Franciscanism, he called that the thisness of life. This, not that. Not what I can label or explain or analyse or prove, just what I can notice and see. Rain falling off a tin roof is my wealth. And I can't possess it. I can just attend to it. Is there anything in closing that you wanted to add that I might not have asked? Anything that you felt you wanted to share?
Yes. What I loved about my rights and the lasting effects, because we've talked about the things I haven't loved and the things that have been hard. But the one thing that I can say above all else that I wasn't expecting to get, but I have, has been this community. I shared with some men recently that growing up, I was quite an effeminate male. I didn't have a lot of male friends. I was picked on a bit for not being a masculine blokey bloke. And because of that, I had a very strong image of men, that men were emotionless, not me, but blokey men, that, oh, I don't get along with guys, that I will never get along with guys. And this work has welcomed me into a community of brothers, men in this circle that I love dearly. And as you were talking about Lord of the Rings, I thought there was one quote, one section of Lord of the Rings right at the pinnacle that symbolizes that brotherhood for me. And it's when Frodo and Sam are going up the mountain and Sam says to Frodo, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. And that is what epitomizes this community for me.
Goosies.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the goal, that I'm known and seen for who I am, not for who I wish I was. I just got to open up to any questions, and if you've got a we've got some chat here happening, so I'm just going to see if there's any questions there. No, that's Mike sending questions. So if you've got a question, you can text it and I will read it back. But while you're thinking of them, if you've got any, I just open it up to every man here. And woman. I beg your pardon.
What was the fourth thing from Wilbur?
Well spotted. Show up. Now, the problem is that we show up before we wake up. We make it all about ourselves. So we try to turn everybody into versions of ourselves. We use our ego to, or corporately use our ego to colonialize. You should talk like me, dress like me, speak like me. Follow my 12 steps, my 6 steps, my 10 ideas, and you will be successful like I am. We call it evangelism or mission work. All over the world, we've fucked people up doing just that. And that's showing up in the wrong order. If we wake up, then showing up is about solidarity. We stand with people in their pain, their suffering. We get alongside them and identify with their suffering, not as their hero, not as their saviour, but as somebody who will stand with them in their pain and understand their story as much as we can. That's when we show up after we've woken up. Thank you. Good question.
I got two questions. The first is just a spin off of that. So is that order important in Wilber's model? Like the order?
It's vital.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've heard models where people emphasize like a wake up process earlier, but I don't know. I don't know enough depth.
It's not so much that you should, but that you will. We don't tend to wake up when we haven't cleaned up. And we can't wake up really until we've grown up. And so his model is based on observing if we're doing our work. His books are incredible, but and it tends to correlate with Bill Plockett, and I mentioned Bill earlier. Bill's much more into an ecocentric developmental model, and that's a whole other story, of which our expression of the rights is a big part of that. But yeah, that's how Ken Wilber expresses it.
Yeah, and the second one was, yeah, so you mentioned that like there was and Judy came in as well and just said that there was a moment where you had a really spiritual experience with God and you were on a high horse. What was it like what did it take for you to come down to level ground again? Was that the rights that did that for you? Was that
no, life? Because you see, if it's a euphoric experience, interesting, because I'm going to use a bit of scripture here. Paul talks about some man who went to the third heaven. Then Paul says, but I won't speak about that man. Instead, I'm going to speak about this guy who suffered and has this thought in the flesh. He goes the absolute opposite direction. I'm not going to brag about my spiritual insights or achievements. I'm actually going to talk about my failures. Because when I'm weak, then I'm strong. He actually uses that example in something which is actually grounded in the rights, which is that very passage about it's my failures that wake me up, that reveal myself to me. Like you were saying earlier, Hudson, my humiliations are where I notice and I can grow if I take action. So any euphoric experience becomes a consumerism. It's, it's like I call it spiritual tourism. I took the photos, I had my selfie stick, I posted it on social media. Yeah, look at me. In fact, if I go to meditation now and I go to silence and I have an encounter of anything, like some kundalini energy emerges from within you. Yeah. And I notice my ego goes, oh, that was good, let's do that again. And I go, no, I don't want to control this. I want to let go of that. Mm. And then it's actually more available to you if you don't try and attach to it. Because when you have any kind of experience and your ego attaches to it, you turn it into something that kills it.
I think this might have been in your notes. But Thomas Merton, who once said, he journaled this?
He journaled it.
He journaled, this morning I had an original thought. I did not write it down. Today was a good day.
In other words, he observed the ego and said, no ego, you're not going to publicize this.
Yeah, thank you.
Got someone in the waiting room.
Oh, that's a pity.
He just jumped in.
Question. Have you found any change in your desires or goals that you've had in your life since you writes? About how you saw your projected lifespan with the workshops and such changed?
It's a good question. I don't think really I've had any major changes in the goals that I have, but I think the way that I attain them is what's changed. Thank you. I'm still driven by and passionate about the same things, but I don't want to give away my gold in order to get them.
He was showing me photos of an R34 Skyline earlier, because he's already got an R32 Skyline and now he wants an R34. But you know what? Before, the old Hudson would have been, oh, should I sell it and buy this one? But now he can just laugh at himself, can't you? And go, no, it's selling.
But yeah, absolutely.
You don't take yourself so seriously, or that part of you so seriously.
No, that part of me is, and I think it's in doing this that I can recognize that part of me is the little boy that wants to have fun and just doesn't want to stop having fun. Everything needs to be fun. I just want more fun, more. And I can acknowledge that part of me and go, yeah, there's a part of me that really wants to have fun right now. Yeah.
I have a question. How do you feel, both of you obviously being married to two wonderful women, how do you feel that you have all like this and this beautiful space and that we aren't a part of that, whether it's good or bad? How do you guys feel?
I hate it. I desperately want, and I'm not just saying this because you're here and I want to avoid an argument on the way home in the car, but I desperately want something like this, like what I've found for you. And I feel that because I've always wanted something like this and now I found it. And I feel that I want to be a part of going away to do the rights. And I want to help facilitate this for other men. And there's an initiated men's retreat coming up in a few weekends' time. And I feel I want to go to this, but I'm very mindful that I don't want to leave you behind. It's not that I'm obligated to be with you. It's that
your best friend.
In my heart, you are my best friend and I don't want to leave you behind. And that's part of what I was saying with the rights. The hardest thing for me is that I want to be in two places at the same time. And one of those places is I want to be with you, but there's been a very clear split of I can't bring you to this a lot of the time.
I'm aware that in long-term monogamous relationships, you and your partner do leapfrog. So Judy goes ahead of me and I kind of play catch up, and then I'll go ahead of her and she catches up. And I love that because you keep growing one another in that process. And it's so wonderful to where both of us were 12, 13 years ago to where we are now, completely aligned in values and understandings and expressions of life and what matters to us. And sometimes I once heard this analogy that marriage is like two sailing boats sailing off in a beautiful harbour in the daytime and coming together at night and mooring up alongside one another and sharing everything and all their experiences and discoveries and going out again the next day and coming back each day. And sometimes you sail together, but not often, not every day. And I kind of think that's a really healthy interdependence that happens in a marriage. And I would love for Judy to experience the rights if she wanted to, but I don't need her to. But I get what you're saying. There is a sense in which I think the hardest thing for me is knowing that Judy doesn't have the kind of circle space I have to be honest and vulnerable. She has a lot of friends from a whole lot of different worlds, and she's able to hold that tension better than I can, to be honest.
Can I make a very quick comment here? I think in society we are sold up. We as boys and young men have our mates, have our friends that we see a girl we're interested in, and we think, okay, that's what I want. And then you either move into a long-term relationship or marriage, and it almost excludes masculine company for a long time, at least in my experience. it did. I think we need to be careful. Men's rites of passage and Forge, the younger men's rites of passage, is important for men to understand themselves as a single entity, because unless they do, they can't respond to their spouse. They can't, in a way that is truly productive. I think women's role in our work in CFMA is essential, and I'm really open and wanting that to happen. I think we can't lose sight, however, of the fact that there is different things in a women's rites of passage, and there are different things in a men's rites of passage. And I think we have to understand that. Then a women's rights can't be a men's rights. A men's rights can't be a women's rights. And I think we just need to work together, both sexes within this organisation, to actually move forward. And I'm really encouraged by that. Yeah.
Carl Jung calls that individuation, and it's healthy maturity. You expressed that doing the Camino. Ros didn't do the Camino with you. You did the Camino because it was your own story, your own journey, your own work.
Exactly.
And
so there are specific things that I think as men we need to do, specific things as women we need to do. And we need to give the space to each other to do that.
Yep.
And that's what
Ken?
I'll just add to that too, because I really agree with Max and Natasha. That was a really big ask, because I'm pretty sure it's not. I mean, the rites of passage time, we keep it sacred and not talk about it or whatever, but I recall being on the first returning men, so if you don't know what that is, men who've done the rites go back in some format. I'm going to try not to say too much about it. But the very first time a group of men who had done the rites over maybe 2 or 3 years, I remember Bradley was there, and the thing that stuck in my mind the most was the topic we talked about probably for an hour or so, was our wives, our partners need something exactly like this. And the questions were, what can we do? Where could we start this? Could the men be offering this as well? And we were just, the heart of the men were already, that was the only thing we talked about, if I can remember rightly. Yeah, I agree. And it's still an urgent issue, but then I agree with what Max says, in fact, as men, we have to help and support the women to raise up this type of thing for women, because we can't do it as men. But it's been like a burden. I think I've seen a lot of nods here for the men who've done the rights to go, yeah, I totally agree, and it's needed. So, and hats off to my wife and most of our partners, because we come back and we are very, very changed, and we can't display it. We've got to hold that, and it's a difficult road for some of us. But the heart of us as initiated men is to see everybody have an opportunity in some format, whatever that could be. But I know as a man, I have no idea. So I'm looking forward to it. So that Dan's through mine too, in some way, will develop. And it's been years, so I think it's like 12, 13 years that happens.
Time for maybe one more question. It's getting late. If there's one urgent, pressing.
Our experiences of waking up is it normal, or are they supposed to change your relationship or understanding of morality?
The motivation for morality, yes. Morality, no, but the motivation for morality, absolutely yes. For me anyway. I remember went to Rob Jones and I said, Rob, if I believe the things you're saying, you're kind of saying I can absolutely do anything. I can leave my wife and hook up with somebody else. Doesn't matter. We're sin abound, let's sin abound. So grace can abound even more somehow. There's a sense in me that there are no consequences. There's no divine being with a dagger about to kill me if I do the wrong thing. I was giving up what I realized was motivated so often by fear. So much of my life motivated by fear. I said to Rob, what will motivate you? He said, great love. I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think it'll get me out of bed in the morning. He said it will. I said, no, you don't know me. It won't. It has. But I don't know, for me personally, to know that great love informs my morality, which I think John writes in 1 John. And anyone who isn't perfected in love kind of is still bound in fear and rules. And so I think the morality is still there, but it's not informed by external code. It's informed by an internal witness. And therefore, it's not imposed by anybody externally. There's incredible license I've experienced in this community. And as a result of the right, sometimes marriages fail, long-term relationships fail because there's such a disequilibrium in the relationship that it's like there's actually only one person in the marriage. Now, that's not true for most or many, but it's true for some. And I know as a pastor, I would have said marriages have to stay together at all costs, unless there's violence in the marriage. And now I'm okay letting things fall apart and still trusting that there's a greater story going on. Now, my own marriage didn't fall apart, and I'm grateful that it didn't. But there was a question where I held that lightly and going, can I hold this marriage in love, not in fear, not in, well, I have to, otherwise God will judge me forever and I'll go to hell. But because I love my wife and she loves me, and that's the absolute only reason we'll stay together, the only reason we'll stay together. And that was scary for me, to be honest. If I can actually do what I want, actually do what, all things are permissible, but not everything's beneficial. What's wisdom say, not what do the rules say? So yes, the morality is informed by a whole other energy when you wake up.
Okay. Yeah, so the relationship changes.
The relationship changes dynamically.
Yeah. Will you forgive me for asking one more?
Go.
In the blurb for the event tonight, it seemed like there was a hinting that there's some sort of similarity between integrating a traumatic experience and having a waking up journey. Not sure if I just misunderstood that or if you could speak into that.
Who wrote the blurb? Do you want to talk to that, Dan? No. As a therapist who specialises in trauma, so I probably can, my own experience is that my trauma came to a head. I had trauma since I was a kid. It came to a head. I couldn't go on. No more business as usual. Sorry, my body was saying with depression, you can keep trying. I'm not going to shift. Keep going. Knock yourself out. We're going to just keep hitting this wall. And at which point, trauma woke me up. But only because I had, what happens to a caterpillar when it stops being a caterpillar? It doesn't become a butterfly. It goes into a chrysalis in darkness and it becomes caterpillar gel. It becomes this mushy, opaque nothing. And you need wise elders or crones and sages around you, wise older women, wise older men. What excites me about this is we did the older rites before we did the younger rites, so we would have wise elders to help me. And I've said this publicly because Max was on my rights and he was a lifeline for me because everything was falling apart in me. And I kept on going to him, am I going to be okay? And he kept on saying, you'll be okay. Because I felt like mush. So that's trauma is not, what was it Richard Raw says? Two things that wake us up, great suffering and great love. Most of us are too stubborn and ignorant to wake up to great love. So it's great suffering that we're given.
If I may, also Richard Raw, in his 7 themes, I think it's 7 themes of an alternative orthodoxy, he says that pain, grief, death, relapse, and trauma are our greatest teachers rather than doctrines or theology. That we learn from hitting that wall, because eventually you're going to go, I can't hit this wall anymore. And that's when you wake up. You need to.
Is there anything else?
Is there anything else? You can't be asleep any longer. You can't just live unconsciously, because there's no, it's horrible because it is great suffering, but it snaps you awake.
Questions?
So you choose to learn from.
Yeah.
Another saying, the truth will set you free, but at first it'll really piss you off. Thank you, everyone, and I'm going to hand back to Dan.
Thank you, Richard and Hudson, for sharing tonight. I think that as I've heard you guys talk about the rights and integrating the rights back into life, I was thinking back to my own rights and how it was easily the most formative and transformative experience of my life. And I know that that's really true of many of you. It's been a great advertisement for the rights. So before we have a cup of tea and some dessert, I just want to give you a plug. If you're here tonight, you've not done the rights, I want to encourage you to consider doing them. We've got the men's rights coming up in August. There's a big banner over there. Hit up Richard, hit up Wayne, some guy who kind of looks like Wayne.
Steve.
And Steve. If you've not done the rights, I can only, I can't recommend it more highly. The Young Men's Rights Passage is happening in April, and there has been a lot of talk tonight about the need for rights for women, and Judy and Donna and a bunch of other ladies, that's in the field stage, but it is coming. It's a work that we recognise as much needed, and there is going to be a women's rights hopefully next year, but if not, certainly the year after. There you go, I'm putting the pressure on you. No pressure. But we recognise the need for women's rights, and that women's rights is coming. A few other ads before we have break for supper. We've got initiated men's retreat this coming weekend, and it's not too late to come along. If you've done the rights already and you want to have your booster shot, your second dose, if you will, your second injection of whatever it is, initiation, then you can come along. It's next weekend and it's not too late to sign.
Not this coming one, the one after.
Sorry, 2 weekends time. See Wayne over there. If you'd like to try to initiate the men's retreat, we'd love to still accommodate you, and there are a few slots left. Something very exciting happened last week. Myself and Steve and Max and Wayne, we went out and booked a venue for May next year for our first National Men's Conference. So that is exciting. We're going to...
And the year after.
Sorry, and
the year after.
2023. So in May 2022, we're going to be having a National Men's Conference for the Centre for Families. I'm so excited about that I want to flag that right now and put it in your diary. The dates are the 20th to the 22nd of May 2022. That's a lot of twos in that. So we're going to put out a date claim. It's going to be in South East Queensland. More information will come, but that's a very, very exciting development in the life of Centre for Families that I've had to give a huge plug to tonight, and will continue to. These events, I just love them because I love seeing
faces, familiar faces, and also meeting new people. Come and say hello if you haven't met me. My name's Dan, and I'm with Wayne. I do stuff that makes it happen behind the scenes. So we're going to have 3 more of these events this year. We're aiming to have them once a quarter. We'd love to have you back for an evening with. We were talking at the start that this venue is too small, and it's a lovely venue, but it's probably too small, and that's great. We want that problem, so feel free to come along. The next one will be in July
17th.
July 17th, and we will be sending out a record of that. Finally, I just want to thank again Paul.
We're wrapping up, guys, so I'll say bye-bye.
How you don't know that you want to have 2 documents? Some have 3.